Good evening and welcome to the online wine tasting club and our old vine specials. Apologies for a couple of minutes late. Obviously, Alex hasn't got his bright shirt on and he's behind the camera tonight, so could you expect anything else? But no, we're really, really excited. We've got Alun Griffiths MW joining us tonight to talk through these wines. So before we start, did you want to introduce yourself a little bit and talk about the Old Vine Conference?
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you very much indeed for the welcome, and I'm delighted and even honoured to be having this chance tonight to talk to a group of very passionate wine fans. Just a little bit of background, literally a minute or so, about the Old Vine concept. When I started in the wine trade and I was a buyer, and I'd visit vineyards, often I would go and taste in somebody's cellar, and they'd say, "Well, here's my cuvee of this, that, and the other, and here's my Old Vine cuvee of the same wine." And I said, "Well, why do you make a separate cuvee from the old vines?" He said, "Well, because the old vines give us a better wine, a more concentrated wine." And I began to take an interest. And of course, the further you go into wine, the more you realize that old vines are revered by serious winemakers. If you're trying to make wine for the mass market, huge volumes, you're not interested in old vines at all, because what old vines give you is a smaller crop, but a more concentrated fruit. So it's of interest to people who are looking to make high quality wine where volume is not the issue. So and about a few years ago, a group of us launched the Old Vine Conference. It's a not-for-profit organization to preserve and promote the heritage of old vines. So, and it's been remarkable, the response that we've had since it started, in that people have come from all over the world and said, "Well, I've got a vineyard of 110-year-old vines here in Turkey or in California or in the Lebanon, in Chile, in Argentina, in Bolivia, all sorts of places." And so it's been a fascinating journey of discovery to see just what is there, and in terms of the wines that come from these old vines. And it's also, I think that it's true to say that if you look at some of the vineyard regions of the world, an old vineyard, say if it's 100 years old, it was planted around the time of the First World War, it isn't just a vineyard. It plays a role in the cultural heritage of that village. There's generations of peoples have existed alongside that vineyard. Some of them have worked on it. And of course, within the family that owns the vineyard itself, it may have been handed down through 4 generations. So there's a lot to say about old vines.
So I think we should get wine number 1 into the glass, because that's what we're all about. And I'm sure some people with us are being a moment or two behind already have wine number 1 in the glass. But yes, we've also got anyone who's joining us for the first time tonight. We've also got our Slido. So you can either scan the QR code that turns up in a moment, or you can go to towtc.co.uk/taste. And that will allow you to, from another device, pop in your tasting notes and let us know what you think, what you're tasting as we go through these wonderful, wonderful old vines. Lots of cool styles, lots of little different things. But we are starting with La Malosa from Tuscany. And this is a lovely yet interesting colour.
Very interesting colour. It's from a grape called the Procanico, which is also known as Trebbiano Toscana. There's a lot of Trebbiano in Italy, and generally it's a relatively neutral wine. So it's if it's made to be consumed quite young from young vines, it can be quite neutral, and so it lends itself to blending with other varieties. But as I've often found with grape varieties that are neutral, if you let them age, if you get a 60, 70-year-old wine from a relatively neutral grape variety, it can be very, very interesting. So let's have a look at this then. This has no oak at all. It's from volcanic soils. 2024, quite a cool wet vintage in this part of the world. It has a 3-week maceration rate on its skin, so that's where the colour comes from. Using sort of fruited carrot, apple pears. Yeah, it's very, very strong on the apple character. Ripe red apples, I think, despite it being a quite cool year, and you think therefore the grapes might struggle for a bit of ripeness. There's no lack of ripeness there, no lack of richness. wines. Sorry, the wines. Everybody got a cup of tea. It's tea. It's something that's only been around for the last 10 or so years. And people, some people that find it too extracted, and there'll be bitter, harsh notes can creep into the taste profile. But when I mentioned apple, I mean, you can think of other things that come into your mind, like Calvados and cider, as flavor as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think there's, as the tasting notes are popping up that it's got that almost like rustic English cider kind of feel out in that that's a little bit of tang, this little bice, but and I think it is going to be, I think, this Marmite kind of wine that people go, that's really me, or that's not me. I see this as I love it, but I just see this almost kind of like a strong wine where you have a tasting menu that's perfectly paired with something. You have half a glass of this. It needs to be the thing for the right place. It's not going to be something that I'm sitting drinking a bottle of, perhaps, but it's a really interesting wine.
I think it would work well in restaurants where you have a sommelier or somebody to advise, because if you just picked a bottle of this off the wine list, not knowing quite within wasn't there, there's just two of you, you might think, I don't really want to get through a whole bottle of this, but a glass would be interesting, and then you can always go back and have another glass. But
absolutely, if I wandered in and ordered a Trebbiano and I got that, I'd be a touch shocked.
It needs to be, because it might be in the white wine category in a wine list when it should have a category of its own, really. But what I like about it, apart from the very lovely deep appley aromas, is the length of the wine. It's always something that was driven to building as a qualitative benchmark very early in my career, was especially with young wine. This is 2024, so it's a young wine, and when a wine, for instance, is not showing all its potential, you're tasting you go to Bordeaux in April and you taste a wine that's 6 months old and will last for 30 years. You're not seeing all of it. But what people was the softness of the wine will develop with time. The tannins will soften with time. It will blossom with time. But what's there from day one until the finish is length. If the wine has length, if it stays on your palate a long time after you've spat it out or swallowed it, that's a good indicator. And for me, this is long on the finish.
So, interesting question. I think interesting question. Everyone else might think it's not. So, we're looking at old vines as obviously the age of the vine. Do old vine wines do better when they're young, or old vines do better aged? Or does it really depend on the grape, on the style, compared to anywhere else in the wine world?
It depends on the grape. I mean, if you had a Gamay, for example, in Beaujolais that's made from old vines, I think that it could be still pretty instantly attractive and appealing. But some other grape varieties, I mean, I mentioned this, for example, is not a grape variety that is destined to make old wine. So I think most of its quality is pretty apparent now after 1 year and 2 months. But if it's something like a Syrah, for example, a wine which is designed to age because it's got a lot of tannin and a lot of acidity, the old vine, when I talked at the beginning about old vines give wines which are more concentrated, it means that every aspect of that wine is more concentrated. The fruit is more concentrated, the acidity is more concentrated, and the tannin is more concentrated. So with a grape like that, or Cabernet Sauvignon, grapes which are tannic and acidic, I think they benefit from or they show more when they're allowed to age, put it that way.
Absolutely. So just having a look at these, and I think what's great about these tasting notes, and I say regularly, the more and more things you see, you can realize this is quite a complex wine, and you can see that because of the length and breadth of tasting notes in here. And I do agree. Like the point here, this one's Grengos. If you're not sure what to expect, you pick this up and you go, what is this? And you have a sip and it's something a bit different, and it might be something because you've not had it before or don't know it. You have that little bit of almost like shock to it, but then you're like, oh yeah, and you go back and you try different things, and you taste a little bit more, and I think it's absolutely brilliant.
There's one comment that somebody made, that their wine was a little cloudy. It has no intervention. Once it sits in a stainless steel tank. After the fermentation maceration, it sits in a stainless steel tank for 7 months and then is bottled without any further intervention. So it's not filtered or fined. So that explains a little bit why it might have a little haze anyway. It's not a fault. It's not a fault in the wine. It's just minimum intervention on the part of the winemaker.
Absolutely. So I think the next question that's at the bottom here, this is, you know, the vines are here between 30 and 35 years. And I think this is a big part of what we'll talk about tonight, and the reason for the Old Vine Conference. At 30 to 35 years, how does this make it an old vine wine compared to anywhere else in the world?
Okay. The majority of wines made for commercial use, say to be sold in the supermarkets, which after all is the vast majority of wine, or wine to be made for consumption locally within a few months of the harvest, inexpensive wines. They're made from young vines. And when I say young vines, vines reach their peak of productivity probably in their teens, sort of 10, 15 years. What we don't have, other than in South Africa, there is not a legal definition in the wine world of what constitutes an old vine. The South Africans have actually gone for it and said, we will regard any vine as old once I think it's 35 years old. And that is, so if you see old vines on a South African label, it means it's at least that age. In the rest of the world, there isn't any such constraint. So somebody might just say, well, it's an old vine because I've got some vines of 10-year-old and I've got some 25-year-old vines. So the 25-year-olds count as old vines. So there isn't a statutory legal definition. In the context of a Trebbiano like this, yes, I think this would be considered an old vine because the vast majority of Italian Trebbiano is inexpensive, relatively neutral wine to be made, bottled young, to be drunk young, and therefore there's no perceived benefit for the producer in leaving his vines or her vines to age for 30, 40 years just to get a smaller crop, which you can't sell for much more money. So in this context, I think this is a relatively old vine. We'll be tasting some later on, which are much, much older.
Brilliant. I think that's a fantastic thing. And it is that, you know, old vines for different wines are different things, you know, and there's some wines that, you know, are going to be benefit from being older vines, some wines less so. You know, a cheap and cheerful Italian Pinot Grigio has no need to be 40 years old.
Exactly.
And it is what you want to have, what the winemaker wants to have in the bottle at the end, and also that, you know, the care and the length and the time it takes to get to that kind of level. But I think probably we should move on to wine number 2.
Just on that subject again, if you come to a property such as for a Bordeaux classified growth, for example, where they are looking for quality, not quantity very much, they would regard 30 years as an average minimum that they want to have in their vineyard. So if they've got they have to replant a vine, and it happens, vines die and have to be replanted. They put new vines in. That new vine product won't go into their top wine for many, many years. One of the reasons why in Bordeaux and in other places they have the concept of second wines. So the second wines are the product, or even a third wine in some chateaux will be the product of the young vines.
I've got Tessa, who is ready to join us live, if that is okay. Shall I bring her up?
Absolutely. Fantastic. So let's get wine number 2 in the glass, which is our...
Hello. Good evening. Good evening. Hello, everybody. Good evening, Alun. Thank you for tonight. Good evening, Jamie.
No, it's lovely to see you, and thank you very much for joining us and taking the time to come and have a little bit of a chat. We've obviously got a couple of videos from you which we can show in a little while, but I think before we do that, while we've got you live, if you just want to tell us a little bit about the wine, the vineyards, and why old vines is important to what you're doing with Barbera d'Asti.
So, wow, how many minutes? How many hours? No,
as many as you would like.
No, so I'm Tessa Donadieu. Just for the people who don't know me, I'm the export manager of Vinchio Vaglio. Vinchio Vaglio, it's a co-op, it's a cooperative born in 1959 from the idea of only 19 wine growers, and we are located in Piedmont, near Asti, 20 kilometers far from Asti. So Asti is a very famous area for Barbera d'Asti. So Barbera is the most located grape. Nowadays, our wine growers are around 200 family wine growers for 500 hectares, and 75% of our production is dedicated to that amazing grape, which is Barbera. Barbera is the most planted red grape in Piedmont. I would say is the workhorse grape of Piedmont, even if Nebbiolo is considered the most noble grape, but Barbera is really all over Piedmont. I would say Barbera d'Asti count around 170 villages for nearly 21 million bottles produced. So it's quite a big production. Among that production, in the early 90s, we decided to map the oldest vineyards of minimum 50 years old vines. And from this project born a first wine, which was a Barbera d'Asti Superiore, so slightly aged in oak for 6 months around. And then on the 50th anniversary, so that's the wine you are tasting now, we released a new project called the Vignevecchie 50, which is only concrete, cement tank, and stainless steel tank. And then we produce other 2 wines from old vines, Nizza and Nizza Riserva. But I don't want to give you too much information because we have a few minutes. So just to explain, this wine for me is really the purest expression for Barbera because it has no oak aging. It's really characteristic from the grape. So usually Barbera has a very loud tannin, an incredibly intense color because of the anthocyane inside, and of course incredibly fruity. So you have all kinds of fruits, little red fruits, black fruits. It's a very interesting, the layer of complexity you can get from, of course, old vines. I want to join just the words you say before, Alun, about what old vines means and which age has to be the vine to be considered as an old vine. Fortunately, since last year, and I think thanks to the input of the Old Vine Conference, the International Organization of Viticulture settled the first legal word about old vines, and they say the old vines needs to be minimum 35 years old to be considered an old vine, because it's the average production, I would say, for a vine in Europe. Maybe in other part of the world is a little bit different. I'm thinking about California, maybe, or I'm thinking about Argentina. But in Europe is the average production cycle of an old vine. And after 35 years old, they can consider it an old vine. If I remember well what the OIV decided last year.
Right.
So, thank you.
No, absolutely. And I think, Alex popped it on there. I remember a couple of years ago, we took a little trip to Piedmont, and it was my first time there. And I was excited for, Nebbiolo, Barolo, or, that was kind of the thing that hit me. And we tasted some great wines, but what I found out, I was so excited with the Barbera, both from Alba and from Asti, that just showcase such a much more approachable style of drinking, but with complexity, with fruit, with balance, with nuance. But I think, sometimes those big wines from Piedmont, they have to be for a certain kind of time. Barbera, I think, is very drinkable all year round, lots of different things. I think it's an absolutely brilliant grape that doesn't get as much love as it should. So no, it's really, really exciting to see that. I think we've got a little video that just kind of shows the winery, and then we've got a video from there as well. So if we pop those on, and then we'll come back to you in just a couple of moments.
Okay, thank you so much.
The scene, bottom, go that left there. Yeah. yeah, just a little overview of how beautiful the area is. And then we've got one more video, and then we'll come back and talk really in the studio from the wine and go. It's right above that one. There.
Ciao a tutti, sono Matteo Laiolo, enologo di Vinchio Vaglio Serra, cantina cooperativa fondata nel 1959 da Giacomo Sorgi. Oggi vantiamo 200 soci e circa 500 ettari di superficie abitata, di cui il 70% coltivato in Emilia Barbera. La cantina è stata fondata nel 1959 sul confine appunto dei due comuni Vinchio e Vaglio Serra. La peculiarità di questo territorio è che presentano dei terreni con una buona e importante percentuale di sabbia, ma allo stesso tempo anche una discreta percentuale di argilla. Questo ci permette di ottenere vini con freschezza, stabilità, ma allo stesso tempo importanti, corposi e strutturati con una grande longevità nel tempo. Il nostro vitigno più importante è la Barbera, di cui produciamo circa 15.000 ettolitri, e oggi andiamo a parlare delle Vigne Vecchie. Le Vigne Vecchie è un progetto nato nel 1987, si è deciso di valorizzare al massimo la qualità andando a scegliere i vigneti più vecchi dove c'era una quantità di produzione per ettaro molto limitata, infatti la media di circa 1 chilo di uva per pianta, che questo ci permette di ottenere un vino di una qualità importante. I vigneti che concorrono per produrre questo vino hanno più di 50 anni, la media è intorno ai 70-80 anni, la quantità di piante per ettaro è molto bassa, siamo intorno a circa 3.000-3.500 piante per ettaro, quindi diciamo si va a produrre circa una quarantina di quintali per ettaro, in modo tale da avere un vino con una gradazione alcolica sostenuta, non elevata, massimo siamo intorno al 14,5, questo grazie ai nostri terreni sabbiosi che ci permettono di non eccedere con il quantitativo alcolico. E la vinificazione si presenta una classica vinificazione in acciaio, il vinificatore orizzontale, quindi una macerazione che dura circa 10 giorni a temperature controllate. Partiamo a 24 gradi di temperatura fino ad arrivare a un massimo di 27-28 gradi. Viene fatta immediatamente, svolge la fermentazione malolattica all'interno delle vasche in acciaio, e dopodiché il vino rimane in affinamento per circa 8 mesi, di cui poi l'acciaio è un procedimento. Si presenta con una colorazione di un rosso rubino intenso, un profumo molto fruttato, netto, caratteristico, e al gusto asciutto, sapido e poi molto persistente. Ciao a tutti e buono studio.
So
You got the word from Matteo Laiolo, our winemaker.
no, absolutely. We're getting everybody. It's great to get the knowledge and the information and the passion from so many people about the wines. And I would love to sit and talk all day, but there's too many old vines, too many wines that we're trying to run through. But before we move on, just a couple of last questions is how of what you make, how much of the wine you make is old vines, and then also going forward, how do you see old vines as a priority as part of winemaking history and culture, with that balance of the commercial aspect of it?
That's a good question, because to come back in the context, when the project of our old vines born, it was in the middle of a big storm, because it was during the methanol. I don't know if you heard about that problem we had in the 80s regarding the methanol in Italy. So every wines, the quality of the wines, the people were not didn't rely anymore in the Italian one, and especially in Piedmont and in Barbera. So it was a way for us. So we decided our biggest quality project at the same time, just to get out from that storm of mass wine, bad wine, and especially that scandal of the methanol. So in the middle of the storm, we find a way to give a future to our wine growers, and especially because for these grapes and for these grapes coming from old vines, we need to give a sustainable economy to our wine growers. So that was a way to incentivize to give more input, to make better quality, and to trying to make them joining that project. And of course, usually the price of the grape is around 20% more of the market price of Barbera. So it was a way to try to make a point of distinction at that time. And nowadays, since we joined the Old Vine Conference, we are really happy to share that vision with all our all the producers from all around the world. So it gives us like a very enthusiastic future, because through the old vines, through the past, we will manage to continue our work on quality and for the territory for the future. So I don't know if I answer the question, because there are so many aspects, but thanks to the old vines, we got certification, especially for the old vines. We became a sustainable winery 3 years ago, certified Equalitas, which is an Italian but globally recognized certification. And all this work around the old vines just help us to build this project of incoming at the winery, tourism. So everything is around the old vine project. We are really building our marketing around that.
No, and that's absolutely brilliant. And as the notes are coming in from Old Vine Conference on here, I think what's really important about their work is the fact that there can become a recognized standard, and it's not just this vine is older than that vine, so therefore this is my old vines, and the same way that you look at AOC rules or DOP rules or those kind of things, if we can have some kind of recognition as to what that actually means, it becomes about style and about quality, and it protects not only the consumer, but also the winemaker and the history and the culture and the heritage as well, which I think is hugely important. But Tessa, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for sending. Thank you for sending the wines and the content and everything. And after this, we will make sure we go out to everyone who's been watching this today and let them know where to find your wines and where to keep drinking hundreds and hundreds of gallons of it, because there's not that much. It's old vine, isn't it? So the small amount that's available to do. Thank you very much for your time, and
thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Alun. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, the Old Vine Conference, and enjoy this amazing Barbera. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. So, final thoughts on the Barbera?
Always one of my key wines to go. If I'm in an Italian restaurant, I don't recognize the names of the producers on the wine list. Barbera is normally my go-to wine because it's so food friendly. I mean, you don't have to age it, because you can have a wine that's 12 months old, because it doesn't have a lot of tannin. It has a lot of acidity, but that gives it freshness. It's got these lovely black and red fruits. It's got blueberry and blackberry and morello cherry. And it's brilliant with a lot of Italian food. You think of all the tomato-based sauces, which are quite high in acid, and this has quite high acid as well. And it often, it's just, and I like to serve it just a little bit cooler than most red wines. Not as cool as Beaujolais, but in between, say about 16 degrees.
It's one of these wines that I say I would serve it with an ice bucket on the ice, but not in the ice.
Yeah, sure. It needs to be just kept, you just cool it, emphasize the freshness. Beautiful wine, lovely wine.
We have Kathleen.
Absolutely. So last look at the tasting notes, and it's exactly what we've said. Lots of bright fruits, but we've got those slightly, that chocolate, that woody, that gives it a little bit of spice, a little bit of flavour.
That's right.
But as we move on, it's about time to head to wine number 3. So we are heading
to Loire,
to France and the Loire Valley and Cab Franc, and we have Kathleen joining us. Good evening.
Hi, Kathleen.
You might be on mute. We can't hear you.
Yeah, you're on mute. Okay, we're not working for Kathleen.
Okay, just while we do that, so we're moving to Cabernet Franc, and we're heading to the Loire Valley, which is the the home of Cab Franc, really, as a single varietal. We know it's used as a blending grape in Bordeaux, but this is where it really stands out and does its own thing, I think.
Yeah, I think it's true as well. When I first tasted, a lot of people in this country, their first exposure to red Loire, meaning Cabernet Franc, is not a happy one, because historically it's a cool region. It's warm by our standards in Britain, but it's a cool region in contrast, say, to the Rhone or Spain or Italy. And if the Cabernet Franc in the Loire is not ripe, it tastes like green pepper. It tastes
Do you hear me
aggressive
now?
taste. Yes, we can.
Brilliant,
Hello, Kathleen.
Brilliant. So if you just want to finish your note about green pepper, and then we'll jump straight back to Kathleen.
I was just about to say,
Sorry.
Kathleen, that this is a region, your region is one that has benefited from climate change, in as much as you're getting more regular ripeness of the Cabernet Franc.
Yes.
And then we, the consumers, are allowed to see this beautiful grape in its full glory. Because when it's not ripe, I was just saying, it does have a green peppery, slightly harsh, austere, astringent even taste. When it's ripe, it's glorious. It's got raspberries, it's got some black fruits, and it's got acidity. It's got modest tannins. It's not too tannic, but it's so well balanced, and it's not too alcoholic. It can be sometimes it can just be 12 and be perfectly balanced.
Yeah, I would say. Sorry. Astringent tannins, I think, are a thing from the past, like from before 2010, I would say, and definitely before 2015. So yeah, that should be no longer happening, indeed.
No, absolutely. So, welcome to the tasting, and thank you so much for joining us. It's really exciting to have the people behind the wines able to share their knowledge, their passion, their information. So, I'm going to leave the screen to you to talk through your wine, what's exciting about it, a little bit of history, and why old vines are important to you in your region and at your winery.
Okay. So first of all, I'm Belgian, and I arrived in Loire in 2010 when I bought Château de Minière. And at that time, almost all my vines were old vines, over 40 years for sure. And I discovered I had 3 plots of 100-year-old vines. And so tonight you are tasting one of the 3 plots of 100-year-old vines. So old vines for me are a thing of what we work with. Of course, I have since then replanted a few plots, and I have now also young vines, but old vines are really part of what we have, and I'm very proud of it, because obviously it's thanks to the predecessors that we have them, because everybody kept them and kept them on site. So I'm quite happy. So I have 3 different plots of 100-year-old vines on 3 different areas of the appellation, which we vinify separately. To show the difference of the plots and of the area of the soil and of the grapes. And by the way, we also now do Massel selection of these 100-year-old vines to propagate them in our own vineyard, and we also share it with other winemakers, because obviously these old vines are old for a reason, and they are worthwhile to keep on growing and multiplying.
No, and that's brilliant. And it's really exciting. We talk about, vines that become 30, 50, 100 years old. And the fact that is so steeped in heritage, that it's, children and children's children and children's children's children have decided to keep those vines because they were special, because there was a reason for it. And they've not gone, let's do something shiny and new. Sometimes in wine, there's a tendency to follow the trend and grub up and plant the next cool thing, because that's what everybody wants. And I think it's absolutely brilliant and massively important for the heritage. And you go, this wine is older than, most people on the planet, these vines. It's absolutely madness. And it's still producing wine that is soft and delicate and decadent and brilliant. And I think there's probably 2 sides to it. There's the side of making absolutely world-class wine with it. And I keep going back, and, the commercial side of, could you rip it up, plant grapes, make some more wine? Of course you could. But that's not the desire, is it? That's not the desire. That's not the goal.
No, I think the world of wine is anyway not looking for more wine. So
Yes.
that is not our objective. We're looking
Less and
for
better.
wine with identity and with a sense of place and with concentration and quality.
Exactly.
And obviously, commercially, the price will never cover the work that we have in it. But of course, for us, it's also a sense of pride, and we want to keep those wines, obviously, because they're worthwhile keeping and they make amazing wine. So yeah, it's
Kathleen,
not always commercially sound, but that's what winemakers do.
No, exactly. Kathleen, could you tell us what sort of a yield you would get from from a hectare such as this, the 2019, for example?
Yeah, even though I'm an engineer, obviously I don't always calculate yields because I think it would definitely depress me. And obviously we are on the good side of climate change, but on the other side, as you also know, climate change makes for very variable yields. It's honestly, it's ridiculous, the variation we have. I was just checking on my file for preparing. Sometimes we have 5,000 bottles of the 3 plots. And then sometimes you only have 1,000 bottles on the 3 plots. So that is just nature playing its role. And then obviously on bad years, vintages that are not ideal, we don't make this wine. For instance, in 2024, we didn't make it. In 2021, we didn't make it because if we make this wine, it's meant to stand time and it's meant to age for 10, 20 years. So if the quality of the grapes do not offer us that potential, we don't bottle it under the 100-year-old vine. So sometimes the yield is 0 commercially, and sometimes it will never be more than 50 hectoliters per hectare.
And you also have a policy that you keep the wine
in a good year,
in the cellars
so,
for several
it's a lot of
years
work.
until you consider it to be ready to be released, which is great for the consumers. I think we've lost you.
Yes. We keep it multiple years in the cellar because obviously it would be too concentrated and harsh to drink it right at the bottling. It wouldn't be ideal. Now you taste 2019, which shows a good integration of tannins, a nice evolution, but still has 20, 30 years of potential, I would say, or more.
Sure.
We also bottle it in magnums and in 3 and 6 liters for really standing the test of time for 50 years or more. No?
So we can have a vine that's 100 years old, make the wine, hold it for another 50 years. So we can have a bottle of wine that is 150 years in the making.
Yes,
is
indeed,
that not amazing?
That would be fun, yes.
Question. So,
Yes.
okay, cool. Great.
Indeed. Yeah. So people ask, is there some
the question
oak?
is there some oak? You've got yes. What is it aged in before you
Yes, there is. So vinified in amphora.
Barrels.
So it's amphora and foudre, large foudre. So not small barrels, but large foudre.
Right.
And never, not new, and anyway not to enter around of the tannins. So there will be a lot of oak, but it will not be too in.
No, I think oak would take away from the purity of the fruit here, and if it was excessive new oak, I mean. But this is beautifully balanced between the little bit of oak influence and the freshness of the raspberry fruit.
And I completely agree with your points earlier. You know, when I first got into the wine industry, I would dread a shit on because and I think that was the thing. And we saw some great Cabernet Franc being grown in. We saw some great Cabernet Franc in the New World for a little while, and there still is. But we're now seeing that same style in Europe.
Exactly. Good.
I think we might be losing
Kathleen.
Kathleen, I'm afraid.
We seem to be losing you here, Kathleen. So I think we might be at the stage that we say a massive, massive thank you for joining us. if anyone's got any questions for Kathleen, pop them in the chat and we can share them over and get the answers back. Just so we seem to have that connection's dropped abroad, unfortunately.
Whoa.
Sorry. Sorry, I'm on an event, so I don't have the best Wi-Fi. I'm sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. And yes, we understand you're at an event, so we can let you get back to that. But no, thank you very much for joining us. And any final thoughts before we let you go? Anything people must know?
I hope you appreciate indeed all the effort that we all in the Zoom make to preserve old vines and to make high quality wine of it. Give attention to this style of wine and to these vines because they deserve attention. So thank you very much for doing this.
No, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out of your busy schedule to come and share your knowledge, your wines with us. They're absolutely brilliant. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you ever so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Slight apologies with the connection there, but Kathleen was at an event and then joining us for an event. So apologies for the Wi-Fi. We're getting a message from her. Apologies for the Wi-Fi issues. But if there's anything that you want to know about this wine, pop us a message. We'll share that and we'll get it back to you via the chat. But any last thoughts on Cabernet Franc and old vines?
It just shows again that density of richness on the mid palate that comes from the old vine. We spoke earlier on about one of the things that old vines give you is concentration. And there's that core of concentrated fruit on the mid palate. And one or two people have commented on it saying it's delicious, balanced, and so on. It is beautifully balanced because it retains freshness. We live in a world where alcohol levels generally are rising, and we're getting 13, 14, 15% red wines from many places in the world, which are impressive, but they can be a bit tiring to the palate. Having a wine like that, which is lighter bodied but still has concentrated intensity, is refreshing to the palate. A great food wine again, but you could even just have a couple of glasses of that on its own in a wine bar. It would go well with, say, a couple of bits of salami or
a little charcuterie board. Yeah, brilliant.
Exactly.
Would be great.
And a big future for that wine. She said she keeps the wine for 4 years before it's released. So that we're drinking 2019. That's virtually the current release. So it's great for the consumer that you haven't got to wait 5 years for it to be drinkable. She's already done the aging for you.
No, absolutely, and it's. I think Cab Franc is such a massively versatile grape as well, and doesn't get the love of this. When you say Cabernet, when you say Cabernet, Sauvignon seems to be
it's
the
default position. Yeah,
but sometimes I think people go, "Oh, I like a Cabernet Sauvignon, but I don't like it where it's a bit green." I'm like, well, take the green away. Drink Cabernet Franc. That's what you've got, isn't it?
That's the key. That's the key.
So yeah, absolutely brilliant wine. So
it's just to finish on that, not in the Loire, but in Bordeaux, in many Saint-Emilion, the right bank wines, which of course are predominantly Merlot, but they all have 20 or 25% of Cabernet. And increasingly, growers have been the last 30 years recognizing that Cabernet Franc is the better option compared to Cabernet Sauvignon for those clay soils on the right bank. And they give you, you need that sort of freshness and zing and acidity to counteract the richness of Merlot. But that Cabernet Franc is proving now to be the more successful of the Cabernets as a blending tool.
Absolutely. So I think it's probably time to move to Romania.
You want to talk about Finn's tasting?
I will once I get the wine in the glass. Sorry, Alex is trying to produce from the back, as he goes. So heading on into wine number 4, and we're heading to Romania. But as we do, for those who are regular members of the show, you may know Finbar, who will dive in with the odd tasting note, the odd food pairing, the odd what we should do. And we all get very jealous and sit here and go, yes, I want to be eating that. So he sent us a little message this morning that he had unfortunately been invited out for dinner. We didn't get the invite and couldn't make it, but he had make it tonight for our tasting. But he has sent his tasting notes over for the first 4 wines that he's tried. So I'm just going to run it through and just see what people agree with, disagree with this. He was very adamant that we need to give him a shout out. So we're doing the fin bar section right now. So the first wine, he thought is very much on the natural spectrum, difficult to pair, but as an aperitif or with grilled sardines. Agree if you agree, disagree if you don't. With the Barbera, he thought that would go really well with a porcini mushroom risotto with truffle shavings. I like that idea. With the Cabernet Franc that we just had, he thought it'd be a veal fricassee with some creamy mashed potatoes. And then with this wine, we'll start tasting it, but he's got a tasting note, and Alex has decided that he wants to try and recreate this tasting note in the back. So he's going to quickly come and move the tasting menu on so I can see the tasting notes on so I can see the chat and what's going on. But then he's playing chef in the background.
We did have a question about the previous wine, which was what do we think about the aging potential of a wine like that?
Well, I think Kathleen answering the thing that, you know, this wine can age forever, 30, 40, 50 years. But it's when I talk about aging, and I'd love to get your opinion on this as well, Alan, is I think it's very much about how you like to enjoy your wine. If you like your wine where it's still really kind of rich and fruity, you want to drink it a little bit younger. If you like those more leathery tertiary flavors, a little bit longer. And then there's a middle ground in between as to how you enjoy drinking your wine.
It's exactly that. It's about. I mean, let's take it away from the Loire for a second and go to Burgundy, where you have this very same argument. And there are two august authorities. One is Jasper Morris, who many of you will know. He's written a seminal book called Inside Burgundy, and another guy called Mark Savage. They're both masters of wine. Mark was a great chooser and finder of wines, and he set up a company called Windrush Wines many years ago. Anyway, they were asked for their opinion about when should you drink Burgundy, and Mark said, "Oh, it's never better than when it's still in the barrel with all that fruit." Jasper said, "Anybody who drinks it before it's properly aged, meaning at least 10, preferably 20 years, is a fruit tart." So there you have a complete contrast of opinions, both valid. It is down to what you want, and sometimes it can be what you're drinking it with in terms of food. So Burgundy matured, it becomes quite gamey, mushroomy, and you can imagine what might go with that. Here we are in the season of autumn venison casseroles and that sort of thing. But with that Cabernet Franc, to come back to the question, Kathleen was adamant that it would last for 40, 50 years, and especially if you bottle it in big formats, magnums and double magnums. But you will lose some of the fruitiness inevitably, and you will get some flavors which are not to everyone's taste. Very much sort of forest floor, some of that mushroomy character again. So it's a question of personal choice. But what I don't like personally, I like old wine, but I don't like old wine where all the fruit has disappeared and you're just left with a skeleton of acidity and tannin, perhaps not tannin, but acidity, and it's gone brown. Then that to me is dried out. It must retain some fruit. But it really is a personal choice.
Absolutely, and I think that's the same with all wine. This is the joy of tasting like this. We put these wines out, and you say, "What's your favourite?" And there'll be lots of different opinions. Some people will love this. Some people go, "That's not for me." And if we all like the same wine, it would be really boring really quickly. The wine list would be red, white, rosé, and that would be it. We wouldn't need to do anything different. So, and having this and people's opinions coming in the chat and their thoughts, it's great, And people put the tasting notes up. It makes my life really easy because I'm like, "What is that?" Oh, someone's put it up there for me. It's really easy. So let's talk a bit about Romania and kind of what it's doing as a country and what the old vines mean. So this is an indigenous grape to Romania that we're doing right now, but we are seeing a little bit more of them doing the more international commercial styles as well. But let's start with what's in the glass.
I think so. This is Feteasca Neagră, which apparently I don't know a great deal about Romanian wine. I've never visited the country, but this is the workhorse grape of Romania, and it goes back in this particular estate. It goes back to the early 19th century. So they've been producing wine from this for a long time. Of course, during the communist era, everything was sort of mass produced by the state, and it took the edge off quality because it was all about just making volume to serve the largely Russian market or the local market of the other communist bloc states. But once they came out of that in 1989, 1990, people perceived that there was potential to make good wine here. And as Jamie just said, one of the ways in which you get your name forward in an international context is to plant things like Pinot Noir and Cabernet Sauvignon, because people then have something to compare with. Wines from France, wines from Chile, wines from Australia, California, South Africa, and so on. It's much harder to promote grapes like this, which people would struggle to pronounce. So it's more interesting, certainly from my perspective, to see what they're doing with a traditional native grape than to see what they're doing with Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's just, for me, it's probably one of the first times I've ever tasted this. In fact, it's not a grape I'm familiar with.
So there's a quick question on here, and we can both share our thoughts on it. Saying, is it a general rule old vines will cost more, lower yields, longer to age, etc.? If you're going for a like for like, yes. You know, if you're going, there's Barossa Syrah and Barossa Old Vine Syrah from the same producer. Yes, because if it's lower yields, you get less grapes on a vine, and if you're trying to make the same amount of money per grape, yes, it will. You know, but obviously there's wineries who do different things. You know, if they've got a commercial product that's what pays the bills, and their old vines is a passion project, they might not have to make the same margins and things like that. If you've got someone who's solely doing old vines, that's an expensive project to do. It's not dissimilar to dessert wines where you have botrytis and you lose a lot of yield, or late harvest you lose a lot of that grape. You get, you know, smaller, more concentrated berries. The vine has to work harder. So yes, so you're getting less grapes per vine, per acre, per hectare, per whatever. And you've also, you know, you've had those vines hanging around for however long. You know, it's taken you, it takes you 35 years to get to having a 35-year-old vine, so you can start doing old vines. So it's a long project. So generally, yes, they will be more expensive, but I think it's the same with anything else in the world. You can get a steak, and that costs a certain amount, and then you have a 35-day aged steak because it costs more. But yeah, so that would be my thought of general rule of thumb.
That's quite right. It's absolutely quite right. And otherwise, there wouldn't be a point with them. And unless, one of the purposes of the Old Vine Conference was to promote old vine wines in such a way that the producers who have decided to hang on to these old vines when there's a temptation to uproot them, we want to make sure that they get a better price for their wine. When we just had Kathleen on a moment ago, she said, yes, we get a premium for this vineyard because of the old vines, but it doesn't begin to recompense us for the work we have to put in there. But they do it as a labor of love as well. So we want people who are taking the steps to preserve these old vineyards and to work them, look after them, to get a better price for their wines, and for customers therefore to recognize that, okay, there's the basic cuvee, that's £10. Here's the old vine cuvee, it's £15. Is it worth 50% more? That's your decision, of course, but we just want to put the equation in front of you.
But I think it's important. What the Old Vine Conference does is bring awareness to this, and if we can get to the point that we know what old vines means, okay, I'm not saying we all know, but in the wine industry, we know the difference between a Chianti Classico and a Chianti Classico Reserva.
Yes.
We know the difference between a Côte de Rhône and a Chateauneuf de Pape. Same grape, same place, slightly different. And then you make that decision. Do I want 3 bottles of the Côte de Rhône or 1 bottle of the Chateauneuf de Pape? But we understand why.
Yes, yes.
Old vines, I'm not sure we quite understand why yet. And I think doing tastings like this and the work of the Old Vine Conference allows people who aren't just in the industry to understand, but the larger wine drinking community.
Yes,
and if we get a level of standardization that people go, all right, so old vines means it's this and therefore that, and we can make that a little bit more straightforward, could be in for a win.
There's a huge amount of marketing that is required to explain it to the rank and file consumer, because if you simply said to a man in the street, okay, this wine is made from old vines, he or she might just say, what is that, good or bad? I don't know. Old in some contexts.
Could you not afford some new ones?
Exactly. You see, it depends what the context is. So we need to explain why it's better. I mean, in the same way that you were talking about beef a moment ago, meat, you would say that if you've got a producer who has special Aberdeen Angus or Hereford beef, and he's hanging it for 35 days after slaughter, loses a tremendous amount of volume through evaporation and so on, but comes out with a better product at the end. Some people will pay for it. Some people will say, no, I'm happy to go to the supermarket and get a mass-produced steak from a, from a mass-produced herd and so on, and we'll pay less for it. Horses for courses.
No, and I think that is the same across every industry. A car's got 4 wheels and an engine, and you can have a really expensive one, and if you have the passion about it or the interest about it, you can make that connection as to why it is and what is the value in it and the value to you as the consumer. And I think that's what's massively important, is what the value is to the consumer in old vines and the wise.
Well, this is a revelation to me. It's got, we've got in the office here, we have the aromas of pan frying venison, which might be influencing in a auto-suggestive way my tasting impressions here, but I'm definitely getting a sort of not just fruity nose, but meatiness on the nose. Sort of
it does have that richness. What have we got on the tasting note here? We've got a little bit of leather in the tasting notes. We've got anchovies. That's an interesting one. Yeah. We've got oak, we've got vanilla, we've got chocolate. And this is, I'm just interested in the chat before I announce it. Is this like any grape that you've had? If someone said to someone who's never had this before, what's it like? Would they like it? Would they not like it? That would be great.
Thank you very much.
So Finbar decided it should be a Marcus Waring venison steak. So that's what Alex has done. So he's put that in front of us. So what we have is we have a quick video from Fantastica. So I'm going to taste this venison. It's under MGM 2024. Okay, so yes, Alex has chucked venison at us, which is a brilliant pairing. If I'd known that, I would have selected a much longer video than 45 seconds. But I just think that gives you a little overview of what the what the winery looks like, what the vineyards look like, and I think it's interesting. We talk about Romanian wine as being new. It's not new. It's new in a global scale for what we're seeing in the UK, but they've been making wine there thousands of years, of solid quality. They obviously had, political changes, which meant that quality went mass produced, like we're talking about. But we're seeing more and more wine on a global scale. People are more traveled. People are seeing more things. That these things aren't a rarity anymore, which is really exciting. What we get to see in the UK and the wine market is absolutely brilliant.
This is great comments, isn't it? Like I lived on it in Bucharest. So first grape to make me buy wine as souvenirs. Fantastic.
Yeah. But it's an interesting location because, of course, it's in the southern part of Romania. It's near the Aegean, so it's quite warm, but they also have mountain breezes coming down into the Vineyard Valley, which maintains a little bit of freshness. So it doesn't get too rich, doesn't get too heavy. I'd love to know what the alcohol is on this.
Alcohol's 15%.
15, yeah. It feels.
So it's 15 alcohol, which leads me to believe that the RS can't be majorly high, maybe 5-6 grams. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know if our chief producer can find out that information. So I don't know what the RS is, but I'd be surprised if it's high if we've got 15% alcohol in there. Most of the alcohol must have gone.
I think so. I mean, the equivalent in Europe, in Western Europe, would be something from the Southern Rhone or from Spain. But they seem to have a bit more natural sweetness. Think of Châteauneuf-du-Pape or Côte de Rome, Gigondas, as you mentioned a moment ago. But this to me has lovely balance. It wears its alcohol very well, is what I'm saying. I wouldn't have. I thought it's quite powerful, but I didn't think 15. I thought maybe 13.5, 14. So it's got balance. It's got these lovely bright black and red berry aromas. There's a hint of smokiness coming through as well, a slightly smoky flavour. And there's quite good acidity, which keeps it fresh. Doesn't allow it to get, because Southern Rhone wines like Chateauneuf-du-Pape have low acidity because the Grenache grape is low acidity. This seems to retain its acidity, and as a result, it imparts a lovely freshness to the wine.
Like, this reminds me of kind of a, not quite as jammy, but like a top quality American Zinfandel, that kind of like a turley kind of style. It's got grapefruit, it's got a little bit of spice to it.
Yeah, the spiciness is attractive at the finish. It stops it getting jammy.
Yeah, it's something like this. Sometimes you'd have like half a glass of it and be like, and I'm done. This has got enough acidity that it wants to keep going.
So this has had a lot of work. The winery's been there for a long time, or the vines have been there for a long time. But the winery was re-established in 2016, and they've used modern equipment and so on to make the wine. It's not rustic in any sense, and it's totally organic. So it's got lovely purity to it, but it still has that character, which is we was talking about. It's not easy to find another wine which, in our lexicon of experiences, which it makes me think of. It's got its unique flavour, which is great.
It seems massive apologies. We can't find the RS anywhere online. It's a hidden secret, but we will.
We'll dig it out.
We'll dig it out. We'll find out, and we will let people know.
But isn't this the sad thing that the Soviets really did nearly destroy?
Yeah, very much. They did the same in Hungary with Tokai. Look what happened in Tokai as soon as the communist era was finished. Investment flooded into Tokai just to restore it to the great glories of the past, and now you've got fantastic Tokai being produced, whereas in the Soviet era it was all mass produced to one formula, one quality, one standard.
Right, absolutely.
Sovietsky brilliance, whatever it's called.
Dead hand of communism.
Wonderful Soviet champagne.
Absolutely brilliant
Look at
wine.
those tasting notes.
I know.
That is phenomenal, isn't it?
Absolutely. So yeah, vanilla, chocolate, leather, tobacco, blackcurrant. Like, it's really, really complex. Loads of kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that's brilliant. But I think it's time to head to from Romania to Bulgaria.
Yeah, across the border.
And another fun, cool grape that is new to me for this tasting as well.
So I'm going to highlight this question. So, are the typical taste characteristics for old vine wines?
Well, that's a bit of it would be a generalization to say that there's one characteristic taste. The one thing I've mentioned before, and I'll just repeat it, I think, is concentration and intensity. I spoke about yields a moment ago. I was asking Kathleen what her yields are, because I mean you can work it out for yourself. If you've got a vineyard, if you've got an acre of vines which produces 5,000 bottles of wine, and the same acre with older vines produces 2,500 bottles of wine, then the minerals and the nutrition that's in that soil is going into a smaller number of bottles. The same nutrition, the same minerals is there, but it's going into a smaller number of bottles. And so greater intensity and concentration of flavor is what I would say, not necessarily smoothness, because you're also going to have concentration of tannin. And when it's young, wines with tannin are not smooth. They can be quite not stringent is the wrong word, but austere until the tannins have softened. So greater concentration and intensity of flavor is what I would say if I had to have one catch-all description of what old vines give you.
Do you get smaller berries as well with the fruit as well? And a higher skin to flesh ratio?
Well, that really depends on the weather of the year, because if you don't have a lot of rain, even in a conventional vineyard with younger vines, if you don't have a lot of moisture, you will have small berries with a high solids to liquid ratio. If you have a lot of rain, you'll have the reverse. I don't think that's necessarily the case, that the grapes are smaller. They're just more intense. It's a contrast to, I'm a great believer in small strawberries. When we have strawberries that you see them in the shops and they're massive,
and they look wonderful, but I never buy them like that because I know they're going to be rather diluted and watery in the middle. So I always pick small strawberries. So, but with grapes, I think it doesn't make that much difference. It's more the weather that determines the size of grapes.
Very interesting.
So let's move on to what it seems like everyone else has moved on to wine 5. So it's probably time for us to play a little bit of catch up. And we are heading to Bulgaria, which I think is another country we've not yet done with the Online Wine Tasting Club. And you go Bulgaria. And for those who love a bit of geography, you go, Bulgaria, do they make wine? But this little corner, the grape is called Melnik, and it's because of the area where it was created, which is Melnik, is kind of right on the, very close to the northern Greek border and very close to the North Macedonia border. So it's in that kind of southwest corner. And Melnik is a hybrid of a local grape and Cabernet Sauvignon to make it. But we do have a couple of videos. The first one is called
Old Vine.
No. There's another Melnik one. He says, no.
I don't have another one.
Do you
I've
not?
got Video Old Vine.
Video Old Vine, that's it. Not Melnik Old Vine, Video Old Vine. Up. There. So that was, a little overview of just, once again, it's a nice vineyardy scene and people are going to go, I've seen a vineyard. I don't see any more vineyard videos. So let's not do a vineyard video. And the winemaker from Aya has sent us a little overview of what they do, who they are, and we'll be back in 2 or 3 minutes.
The Melnik grape variety is quite exciting to work with, at least for me. The name in Bulgaria is translated as broad-leafed Melnik because of its big, broad leaves. People say it makes heavy, bold wines with lots of color, but that's not the case. In my opinion, this variety is all about elegance. The Melnik variety was neglected for so many years because one has to have patience with it. It's a late ripening grape variety. We harvest from mid to end of October, and by this time the early autumn rains have already started, of course. People used to harvest earlier because of that and blend it with some other grapes because obviously it was not ripened yet and no good wine could come out of it. But if you're willing to take the risk and wait for the right time to harvest, then you would know for sure why the wine was so famous during the medieval time among the doges in Venice.
Широката мелнишка лоза може да се отглежда и на тази формировка, която се нарича формировка тип чаша.
The variety is indigenous for Bulgaria and thrives only in the small southwestern part of the country, close to the border with Greece and northern Macedonia. The soils here are very poor, sandy, with a bit of clay and some limestone. Our vineyards with the Melnik grape variety are old, planted somewhere in the mid of 80s or 70s last century, and they were abandoned for the past 20 years before we bought them. It was quite difficult to restore them and bring them back to life, but it was so worth it, and I'm very happy with the results that we have with these wines. The vineyards are organic certified, and we do practice the biodynamic viticulture.
Вината от сорта широка мелнишка лоза са характерни с не много интензивен цвят, достатъчна плътност, с приятни плодови аромати, особено на череша, вишна, като за по-отлежалите вина има и една типична нотка на тютюн.
Vintage 2021 was a very good vintage. The fermentation was spontaneous in stainless steel tanks, and part of the wine was aged in old 500 liters French oak barrels for up to a year, followed by another year of bottle aging. This is the first vintage that we presented outside of the borders of our country, and I'm extremely happy that it received such interest and attention.
So yeah, once again, I just, you know, we keep talking about it, but a massive thank you to you know, Old Vine Conference for helping us get the winemakers who have joined us live, the winemakers who couldn't have given us content. It's and Alan for joining us. It's been absolutely brilliant so far, and I'm hoping you're enjoying it and getting the different views, the different people, the lack of a man in a bright shirt. You know, you don't need your sunglasses for this tasting, which is also brilliant. But just thoughts on this wine, because once again, I'm thinking this may well be a wine that people haven't had. So thoughts on this?
Well, it's certainly got a savoury character, which I like very much. And again, it was helped by the presence of a delicious piece of meat. But even before we had the meat, it's got this beautiful savoury edge, which is a combination of meatiness and a salinity. Saline quality is often something you find in biodynamic wines. These wines are not actually. Oh, yes, they are actually. They are made in a biodynamic way. I realize, but they it's as though the soil seems to impart some sort of salinity, which makes your mouth water, and therefore you want to go and have another glass immediately.
Yeah, it's got this lovely refreshment, and you know, this is not a grape that I've had a massive amount of experience from, but from what I've done, it can be in lots of different styles. It can be kind of really rich and over the top and bold, or it can be quite light, quite fresh, quite zippy, depending on when you pick and what your winemaker choices are and what you want to do. You know, for something that's related to Cab, and there's different Melniks,
Nice,
so
isn't it?
there's different crosses of different grapes that can be called Melnik from the region. So not all Melniks are a Cabernet Sauvignon cross. Some are a cross of two local grapes. Some are a cross of other things. So that makes it obviously really easy when you see your whole shelf full of Bulgarian Melniks in the shop as to which one you might want, as you do in your independent wine merchant. But this one is that cross with Cabernet Sauvignon in it, which is really kind of cool. I just think this is it. We're very much old vines tonight, but I want to say there is something massive for indigenous grapes being grown in the places that they have always been grown, that they should be grown. Because if everyone ripped it up and followed the trends, we'd have Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon, and that would be it. And you know, you look at southern Italy where they keep all these cool little plots of things and stuff like that. I think this is what makes wine so cool, so versatile, so interesting. And
Dara knew about them all before. She knew about them before they were cool.
And there's always something new to learn. However much you think you know about wine, the more you know, the more you find out you don't know anything. And it's absolutely brilliant. And to share these wines with people is so much fun.
I think so. I think that this is absolutely delicious. It's got grown in sandy soils with a little bit of limestone, which sandy soils usually give you quite fruity wine. The Barbera we had a couple of wines back, as was explained, it's grown on a slightly sandy soil, and it emphasizes the fruity character and so on. And yet it's got density as well. These are 50 to 60-year-old vines here. So they give you can imagine that actually look at the color and the style, you could produce a light, fruity, easy drinking, sort of 18 months after the harvest type of wine, bistro type of wine. This is a much more serious wine with the old vine concentration and structure coming through. But nevertheless, the tannins are very, very subdued. There's almost no strong evidence of tannin. There's a hint of smokiness, which I like. But it's got freshness as well.
Yeah, it's that lovely acidity, that lovely freshness that just once you finish that mouthful and you feel your mouth watering to go back for another sip.
Exactly.
I think this makes it a phenomenal food wine as well, because you have anything that's got that richness, that fattiness on it, it's going to cut right through that and go again.
Yeah, it's in southwest Bulgaria, so it's in a sort of fairly warm part of the world, and yet the grapes are grown, the vines are planted at 250, 300 meters high, which again brings that element of freshness in, which is very welcoming. Lovely, absolutely lovely. I can get cherries, a little bit of hints of spice. There's a bit of tobacco leaf there as well.
So somebody has asked a question to Alan that he says, what is it about being an old vine that restricts the yield? Is it reduced sap flow around the plant?
Yeah, well, it's a bit like human beings. I mean, the age of a vine, let's say that some of these vines will be about 80, 90 years old. You think of yourself as a human being, your most vigorous period is in your teens, probably. I know there might be people watching who have teenage children who think their teenage children are anything but vigorous as they lie in their beds for 21 hours of the day. But in terms of your potential energy levels, you've got more when you're young, and then as you're older, you do a bit less. You haven't got the power. I mean, we lose 10% of muscle mass every decade unless we do exercises and so on. So we're slower and weaker as we get older, but we're a bit wiser. And the vine is like that, you see. So the vine doesn't have the vigor that it has. That's why it doesn't produce as much, but it's cleverer. And I'll give you a little example of what I mean by that. 2003, we had a massive heat wave across all of Europe, including in the UK. And I was in Bordeaux the next April tasting the 2003s, and many producers hadn't been able to cope. It was such a concentrated period of heat wave. They'd never seen it before. They hadn't coped. And I went to one of the great Pomerol chateaux, Vierge Chateau Serton, and the guy there in charge, Alexander Tiampon, he said, I've lost 80% of my crop because of the heat. All of my young vines, anything under 30 years of age, couldn't cope. But my old vine Merlot, 80, 90 years old, was untouched by the heat. So they're so well deeply rooted, they can withstand the weather better. So they're wiser, cleverer, but less vigorous. And that is a long-winded way of answering the question.
And I guess we pick up injuries over the years as well, diseases that constrain ourselves, like a bit like my arteries these days. Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's great.
That's a brilliant question at the bottom.
Let's bring that one up. Okay, so yes, is there ever a light, crisp, fresh old vine wine? That's a good question.
Well, I suppose so, because if you have a white wine, let's say you don't see many Sauvignon Blanc old vines unless somebody can point me at some, but you do see some Chardonnay vines that are quite old, and if they're planted in a limestone soil, for example, I can envisage, for instance, Chablis, bone dry, minerally crisp wines. If you had 70-year-old vines in Chablis, you could easily produce something which has all the Chablis characteristics, such as very dry, very mineral, quite saline, high acid, and yet in a more concentrated form. But my experience of old vine examples of fresh, zingy wines is that they tend to get quite textured. They tend to get quite richly textured because of the concentration. So they lose that very vibrant acidity and freshness that you get with, say, Muscadet, Picpoul de Pinet, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. They tend to get a bit fat on the mid palate, and as a result, they sort of tend to contradict their original style. So I think old vines tend to work better with styles of wine which are naturally quite rich textured in the first place. Chardonnay being one, Marsanne from the Northern Rhone being another.
I'd say some of the Canaries wines where they've got native rootstock.
Yes,
they've been there
very
for
volcanic
years,
soil.
but they're in the volcanic soil. They still have a lot of that zingy.
Yes,
freshness,
yes,
but
exactly.
They also have the mid palate, like
Yes,
you're saying.
yes,
So, yeah.
yes.
That's a fantastic question. Really good. Should we move on to one number 6?
I think we shall.
Let's
I think
do
we shall.
that.
So
I shall move that.
We're going to Spain, aren't we?
Absolutely. So we are now heading to Spain. I think one of my favourite wine making regions. Just as much as I love a good Rioja, as much as the next man, this is a region that doesn't get shouted about a huge amount, yet I think makes an absolutely brilliant style of wine from a brilliant grape. And this is a brilliant producer as well. So we've got brilliant across the board here. But we are down in Jumia, which is southeast Spain, and this is mainly Monastrell. So with southern, we're kind of near Valencia, that kind of part of the world for a big-ish city. But so Monastrell is the king of grapes down there, which is the same as Mourvedre in France or Mataro in Australia. And this has got a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon blended in and a little bit of Syrah. But this is the Juan Gil Blue Label, which I've not had for a while. We had the yellow label on the list a couple of weeks ago, but I've not had this blue label for a little while. So excited to have this in the glass, and we can talk a little bit about them and their old vines and all the good stuff.
Yes, this is a very warm part of Spain, as you can imagine, southeast near the Mediterranean, a bit inland. Monastrell is a grape that doesn't like to get its feet wet. Generally, it likes fairly dry conditions, but it would be grown at sea level. This would be quite monstrous, perhaps, but it's about 700 meters above sea level, and that's important to give you the freshness, to give you the lighter touch. So it's grown as a blending wine very much in the Rhone Valley. Many Chateauneufs will have sort of 10 or 15% of Mourvedre Monastrell in it, because they contrast the Grenache, which is all rich, generous, alcoholic, low acid, low tannin. You use Syrah and Mourvedre, Syrah and Monastrell, to provide you with a bit of backbone, a bit of acidity, a bit of tannin. And Monastrell is sometimes referred to as a bit of a blackstrap wine grape. Big, deep color, lots of body, lots of tannin, lots of acidity. So here it's very ripe, so it tempers that acidity, tempers that tannin, and then the altitude gives you some freshness so that it's not just a monstrosity. So let's have a look.
Well, yeah, just while we have a little taste, I think Alex has got a couple of pictures of the old vines in there, so you can kind of see these gnarly, thick, stumped vines. And you look at the land around them. It's not
scorched earth.
It's not green and lush and fertile, allowing loads of minerals, loads of water, loads held up. So these vines, not only are they old, they have to work really hard to bring everything into them. Hence why you get this brilliant concentration of fruit. So these are the old vines at Juan Gil.
I love that one.
That's lovely, yeah.
These goblet chained vines on the slope, just clinging on there, close to ground. Only a few leaves for the grapes they're producing, but because there's so much sunshine.
You can imagine that's a difficult, hard vineyard to work for human labour.
Absolutely. So we do have, while you pop your tasting notes in, we've got a quick video from Juan Gil that we can have a look at. That's the vertical one, bottom right. Selecciones. Oh, that one, yeah. There you go. And we can go through that, and then we'll come back and finish up our tasting notes.
Soy enólogo porque el vino forma parte de mí. Mi padre era agricultor y he visto hacer todos los trabajos del campo desde pequeño. Y ahora formo parte de una familia bodeguera con más de 100 años de historia. Con lo que me quedaría de mi experiencia de enólogo sería con la sabiduría de los agricultores de la zona y con la fortaleza y la capacidad de adaptación de la Monastrell.
No, I like the format of how you're doing this. It's like a chat over a drink.
Exactly,
and that's what we all love as well.
So yeah, I think as we taste through, we can put the tasting notes in.
Man alive, this is a cracking wine.
That is That's the tasting note that you need, isn't it? But you know, this is proper old vines, proper history, proper family, and you know they've been doing this since 1916, still family owned, passing through the generations, and you know in all my years of doing what I do, I first got introduced to this wine when I was a sommelier in the States. I don't think I've ever had a bad bottle of Juan Gil. I don't think I've ever gone, oh, they've had a bit of an off vintage this year. They've had a bit of a year. They are always consistent, always well. Yeah, the silver label, the yellow label. And yeah, I think this point here, Jumilla is massively underrated. Whether it's for quality underrated or just for notoriety, because when we talk Spain and regions, we go Rioja, Ribera, Priorat, Cava, then maybe Rueda, Galicia for Albarina, and then suddenly Jumilla's somewhere down here.
Yeah.
It's.
So what is J for in our advent calendar, Jamie?
Oh, yes, our advent calendars that if you've ordered, you should be receiving today or tomorrow. Here we go. Swap for a promo. So J might be for Jumilla with an H. Yes, exactly. I'm going to go off a very quick tangent here and tell you a story about Jumilla, because it's getting towards the end of it. So I used to run a wine bar in Washington DC, and this guy walked in, sat at the end of the bar, and he's like, "Have you got any wine from Jumilla?" And I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "I don't. Didn't have one by the glass. But what is it you're looking for?" He said, "I've got absolutely no idea, but I'm on a first date, and I read the Washington Post wine thing today, and they said this Jumilla wine was the thing to have." I'm like, "Okay, if you want to impress someone, let's start with Jumilla, and we okay. But what you want is this and this." And he's like, "Oh, brilliant." But it was amazing. That must have been 10, 15 years ago. The Jumilla was in the news, in the wine columns then, but it just hasn't got a huge amount of traction. But, it was brilliant that someone came in, they wanted this thing they'd never heard of because they followed a wine writer, and I was able to kind of direct them. And it shows that it's more than just these kind of things.
Very much, yeah, absolutely. I think this is a typical example of what has happened in Spain in the last 10 or 15 years, in that regions which have been producing wine for decades, but in a rustic sort of style, have been influenced in the best way to make more polished wine, not to make it to appeal to a wider market, sure, but not to denature the essential character of the grapes that are used. So they're not trying to make something that equates to Burgundy or equates to the Rhone Valley. It's still got its own Jumilla character, but it's more polished. This is the first time I would have mentioned oak as a factor in a tasting note this evening, which is a good thing. I don't like a lot of oak influence. So I've been really pleased not to have found intrusive levels of oak. Now, if you can pick up a bit of vanilla on this, that will be from the oak. But it's there, and some people might find it a little intrusive, but I think it's balanced, and I think it will soften into the wine a bit with age, because there are so many other flavors that are contrasting and complementing it, might be a better way of putting it. There's a little roasted character, roasted cacao even, which is, one of the notes there says coffee, but not finished coffee, but the coffee bean, maybe something like that. And then there's the vanilla comes in as well, but I don't think it's out of balance. Put it that way. It's clearly it's obvious, it's apparent. Not everybody likes it. Some people love it, but I'll be interested to see what people think about the oak influence here. But above all, it's got delicious, polished fruit. It's beautifully made. Christmas pudding. There we go.
Lindor double chocolate.
There we go.
Brilliant.
There we go.
So I think as we finish off this day, let's have a last look at the tasting notes, and then we can roll to wine of the night. So just
dark chocolate. The length is unbelievable.
Yes,
it is sublime.
It lingers a long, long time.
So, once again, loads of complex stuff here, loads of great things, coffee, blackberry, black cherry, the juicy, licorice, plum. There's such a smorgasbord of flavors and styles going on here.
Peppers. I actually do get that. That's amazing.
That's wonderful.
Such good note.
So it's some absolutely brilliant stuff. So tonight we're going to go to wine of the night. We're a little bit different tonight, and so I'm going to say a massive thank you to Old Wine Conference, because they have really helped us and supported us with the wines, with Alan coming to join us. Some of these wines are not available in the UK yet. Some are available in other places. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out an email with links as to where you can get them. At this moment, you're not getting them from us. When we can get them into the country, you may get them from us, but we're going to share where you can get that from. We'll get that out.
That'd be a hit.
So yes, we'll bring anything that's not available to us. So if there's something you love, give us a shout, because if we can work out a way to bring some in direct from the winery, we will. If we can get enough people go, I'll take a case of it, a couple of cases of it. I'm sure we can make something happen for you. So
they have sorrel in there. Isn't
Wow.
that a beautiful tasting note? That's amazing. We have 2 badges though.
Well, it's that time of the night that you've got to get a badge in the tasting notes. But yeah, if we pop to wine of the night, well, people can pop that in. Next month, we are going for something, once again, that we've never done before, and we're doing wines of Ukraine. We have Sarah from the Ukrainian Wine Company joining us to do that live with us. So we've got another guest host, which I think, what I've seen from what you guys have mentioned in the chat in the last few months, you like a different voice. You like Alex not here, it's okay. But I think it's really great to get lots of voices, lots of opinions. And as we're trying to build our plan for 2026, let us know, do you want winemakers joining live? Do you want more videos? Do you want more guest hosts? What kind of voices do you want, and what kind of wines do you want to see? Do you want to go back around the world and do wines of Chile, wines of Argentina again? Or do we want to do more things like old vines, indigenous grapes, and stuff that's a little bit more of a deep dive and geeky? It's your club. You let us know what you want to do. But Alan's here for a few more minutes, so if you need to ask an MW more questions, because I don't know the answers, that's what he's here for. We are here. But otherwise, we'll give a couple of minutes for wine of the night and go from there. But any final thoughts on Old Vine Conference? And if people are interested in Old Vine Conference, how can they get involved? Because there's membership, isn't there? For not only if you're a winery, if you're a person.
You can be a sponsor and a member and all sorts, or you can simply log in to things like on YouTube, the conferences. And there was a conference just very recently, earlier this month in California, the first of its kind in California, with wonderful guest speakers, and you can watch it on YouTube. The website is oldvineconference.org. So very easy to find it, very easy to see what they're doing. And there's lots of material there if you want to listen into some wonderful winemakers and wine experts talking about what old vines mean to them and so on. So very easy to get involved and see exactly the range of wines that are available, and listen to people far more knowledgeable than me about the old vines, because they work with them on a daily basis. You've met 2 or 3 of them tonight through the medium of the videos that have appeared. And what you'll see so often, in fact, almost invariably, is their passion for wine and passion for old vines, and the fact that it means more than simply a plant that produces lovely wine. It's something more than that. So please do get involved. Yeah.
Absolutely. So should we have a quick look at wine of the night? And it's a horrible thing to do wine of the night on a tasting like this, because they're all brilliant, they're all different, and like my grandfather said, there's no such thing as a bad whiskey, just some are better than others. So we're going to say there's no such thing as a bad wine tonight, just some are different from others.
But there is an awful lot of thanks and gratitude being thrown towards Alan, very deservedly so.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Thank you to everybody,
very kind,
and thank you to Alan. And yes, and do you know, this is fascinating. After wine number 1, I would like a whole tasting of weird orange cider wines. That is excellent. We can certainly do that. That is brilliant. So so there is a very clear winner on this one, and it is wine number 6. But there are no losers. There is immensely close with all the other wines as well.
Yes, it is.
And a few votes either way could have changed it dramatically below that point. But wine number 6, definitely the wine of the night. So Juan Gil, brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff.
So thank you so much for this evening. Please jump on the website, go and have a look at Old Vine Conference, because it's just such a resource. What they do is massively important to get awareness out, because if there's not awareness and people don't drink them, don't buy them, they ain't going to be there anymore. So please do. If we want more wines like this, people need to get involved. But anyway, thanks from us for this evening. Hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next month for Wines of Ukraine. Cheers. Have a good night.